Chapter 15 Sir Montague Corner. It was about 10 o'clock when we reached Sir Montague Corner's house on the river at Chaswick. It was a big house, standing back in its own grounds. We were admitted into a beautifully paneled hall. On our right, through an open door, we saw the dining room with its long polished table lit with candles. "Will you come this way, please?" The butler led the way up a broad staircase and into a long room on the first floor, overlooking the river. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot," announced the butler. It was a beautifully proportioned room, and had an old-world air with its carefully shaded dim lamps. In one corner of the room was a bridge table set near the open window, and round it sat 4 people. As we entered the room, one of the 4 rose and came towards us. "It is a great pleasure to make your acquaintance, Monsieur Poirot." I looked with some interest at Sir Montague Corner. He had a distinctly Jewish cast of countenance, very small, intelligent black eyes, and a carefully arranged toupee. He was a short man, 5'8" at most, I should say. His manner was affected to the last degree. "Let me introduce you, Mr. and Mrs. Woodburn." "We've met before," said Mrs. Woodburn brightly. "And Mr. Ross." Ross was a young fellow of about 22, with a pleasant face and fair hair. "I disturb your game. A million apologies," said Poirot. "Not at all. We've not started. We were commencing to deal the cards only. Some coffee, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot declined, but accepted an offer of old brandy. It was brought us in immense goblets. As we sipped it, Sir Montague discoursed. He spoke of Japanese prints, of Chinese lacquer, of Persian carpets, of the French Impressionists, of modern music, and of the theories of Einstein. Then he sat back and smiled at us beneficently. He had evidently thoroughly enjoyed his performance. In the dim light he looked like some genie of the medieval age. All round the room were exquisite examples of art and culture. "And now, Sir Montague," said Poirot, "I will trespass on your kindness no longer, but will come to the object of my visit." Sir Montague waved a curious claw-like hand. "There is no hurry. Time is infinite." "One always feels that in this house," sighed Mrs. Woodburn. "So wonderful." "I would not live in London for £1,000,000, said Sir Montague. "Here one is in the old-world atmosphere of peace that, alas, we've put behind us in these jarring days." A sudden impish fancy flashed over me that if someone were really to offer Sir Montague £1,000,000, old-world peace might go to the wall, but I trod down such heretical sentiments. "What is money, after all?" murmured Mrs. Woodburn. "Ah," said Mr. Woodburn thoughtfully, and rattled some coins absent-mindedly in his trousers pocket. "Archie," said Mrs. Woodburn reproachfully. "Sorry," said Mr. Woodburn, and stopped. "To speak of crime in such an atmosphere is, I feel, unpardonable," began Poirot apologetically. "Not at all," Sir Montague waved a gracious hand. "A crime can be a work of art. A detective can be an artist. I do not refer, of course, to the police. An inspector has been here today, a curious person. He had never heard of Benvenuto Cellini, for instance. He came about Jane Wilkinson, I suppose," said Mrs. Woodburn with instant curiosity. "So it seems," said Sir Montague. "I asked her here, knowing that she was beautiful, talented, and hoping that I might be able to be of use to her. She was thinking of going into management. But it seems that I was fated to be of use to her in a very different way." "Jane's got luck," said Mrs. Woodburn. "She's been dying to get rid of Edgware, and here's somebody gone and saved her the trouble. She'll marry the young Duke of Merton now. Everyone says so. His mother's wild about it." "I was favorably impressed by her," said Sir Montague graciously. "She made several most intelligent remarks about Greek art." I smiled to myself, picturing Jane saying, "Yes," and "No, really, how wonderful," in her magical, husky voice. Sir Montague was the type of man to whom intelligence consisted of the faculty of listening to his own remarks with suitable attention. "Edgware was a queer fish, by all accounts," said Woodburn. "I dare say he's got a good few enemies." "Is it true, Monsieur Poirot," asked Mrs. Woodburn, "that somebody ran a penknife into the back of his brain?" "Perfectly true, madame. It was very neatly and efficiently done. Scientific, in fact." "I note your artistic pleasure, Monsieur Poirot," said Sir Montague. "And now," said Poirot, "let me come to the object of my visit. Lady Edgware was called to the telephone when she was here at dinner. It is about that telephone call that I seek information. Perhaps you will allow me to question your domestics on the subject." "Certainly, certainly. Just press that bell, will you, Ross?" The butler answered the bell. He was a tall, middle-aged man of ecclesiastical appearance. Sir Montague explained what was wanted. The butler turned to Poirot with polite attention. "Who answered the telephone when it rang?" began Poirot. "I answered it myself, sir. The telephone is in a recess leading out of the hall." "Did the person ask to speak to Lady Edgware, or to Miss Jane Wilkinson?" "To Lady Edgware, sir." "What did they say exactly?" The butler reflected for a moment. "As far as I remember, sir, I said hello. A voice then asked if I was Chiswick 43434. I replied that that was so. It then asked me to hold the line. Another voice then asked if that was Chiswick 43434, and on my replying yes, it said, 'Is Lady Edgware dining there?' I said her ladyship was dining here. The voice said, 'I would like to speak to her, please.' I went and informed her ladyship, who was at the dinner table. Her ladyship rose, and I showed her where the phone was. And then her ladyship picked up the receiver and said, 'Hello, who's speaking?' Then she said, 'Yes, that's all right, Lady Edgware speaking.' I was just about to leave her ladyship when she called to me and said they had cut her off. She said someone had laughed and evidently hung up the receiver. She asked me if the person ringing up had given any name. They had not done so. That was all that occurred, sir." Poirot frowned to himself. "Do you really think the telephone call has something to do with the murder, Monsieur Poirot?" asked Mrs. Woodburn. "Impossible to say, madame. It is just a curious circumstance. People do ring up for a joke sometimes. It's been done to me. C'est toujours possible, madame." He spoke to the butler again. "Was it a man's voice or a woman's who rang up?" "A lady's, I think, sir." "What kind of a voice? High or low?" "Low, sir. Careful and rather distinct." He paused. "It may be my fancy, sir, but it sounded like a foreign voice. The R's were very noticeable." "As far as that goes, it might have been a Scotch voice, Donald," said Mrs. Woodburn, smiling at Ross. Ross laughed. "Not guilty," he said. "I was at the dinner table." Poirot spoke once again to the butler. "Do you think," he asked, "that you would recognize that voice if you were to hear it any time?" The butler hesitated. "I couldn't quite say, sir. I might do so. I think it is possible that I should do so." "I thank you, my friend." "Thank you, sir." The butler inclined his head and withdrew, pontifical to the last. Sir Montague Carter continued to be very friendly and to play his role of old-world charm. He persuaded us to remain and play bridge. I excused myself. The stakes were bigger than I cared about. Young Ross seemed relieved also at the prospect of someone taking his hand. He and I sat looking on while the other four played. The evening ended in a heavy financial gain to Poirot and Sir Montague. Then we thanked our host and took our departure. Ross came with us. "A strange little man," said Poirot as we stepped out into the night. The night was fine, and we had decided to walk until we picked up a taxi instead of having one telephoned for. "Yes, a strange little man," said Poirot again. "A very rich little man," said Ross with feeling. "I suppose so." "He seems to have taken a fancy to me," said Ross. "Hope it will last. A man like that behind you means a lot." "You are an actor, Mr. Ross." Ross said that he was. He seemed sad that his name had not brought instant recognition. Apparently he had recently won marvelous notices in some gloomy play translated from the Russian. When Poirot and I between us had soothed him down again, Poirot asked casually, "You knew Carlotta Adams, did you not?" "No. I saw her death announced in the paper tonight. Overdose of some drug or other. Idiotic the way all these girls dope." "It is sad, yes. She was clever, too." "I suppose so." He displayed a characteristic lack of interest in anyone else's performance but his own. "Did you see her show at all?" I asked. "No. That sort of thing's not much of my line. Kind of craze for it at present, but I don't think it'll last." "Ah," said Poirot. "Here is a taxi." He waved a stick. "Think I'll walk," said Ross. "I get a tube straight home from Hammersmith." Suddenly he gave a nervous laugh. "Odd thing," he said, "that dinner last night." "Yes?" "We were 13. Some fellow failed at the last minute. We never noticed it till just the end of dinner." "And who got up first?" He gave a queer little nervous cackle of laughter. "I did," he said. End of Chapter 15. Chapter 16. Mainly discussion. When we got home, we found Yap waiting for us. "Thought I'd just call around and have a chat with you before turning in, Mojo Poirot," he said cheerfully. "Eh bien, my good friend. How goes it?" "Well, it doesn't go any too well. And that's a fact." He looked depressed. "Got any help for me, Mojo Poirot?" "I have one or two little ideas that I should like to present to you," said Poirot. "You and your ideas. In some ways, you're a caution. Not that I don't want to hear them. I do. There's some good stuff in that funny-shaped head of yours." Poirot acknowledged the compliment, somewhat coldly. "Have you any idea about the double lady problem? That's what I want to know. Eh, Monsieur Poirot? What about it? Who was she?" "That is exactly what I wish to talk to you about." He asked Yop if he had ever heard of Carlotta Adams. "I've heard the name. For the moment, I can't just place it," Poirot explained. "Her? Does imitations, does she? Now, what made you fix on her? What have you got to go on?" Poirot related the steps we had taken and the conclusion we had drawn. "My lord, it looks as though you were right. Clothes, hat, gloves, etc. And the fair wig. Yes, it must be. I will say you're the goods, Monsieur Poirot. Smart work, that. Not that I think there's anything to show she was put out of the way. That seems a bit far-fetched. I don't quite see eye to eye with you there. Your theory is a bit fantastical for me. I have more experience than you have. I don't believe in the villain behind-the-scenes motif. Carlotta Adams was the woman, all right, but I should put it one of two ways. She went there for purposes of her own, blackmail maybe, since she hinted she was going to get money. They had a bit of a dispute. He turned nasty. She turned nasty, and she finished him off. And I should say that when she got home, she went all to pieces. She hadn't meant murder. It's my belief she took an overdose on purpose as the easiest way out." "You think that covers all the facts?" "Well, naturally, there are a lot of things we don't know yet. It's a good working hypothesis to go on with. The other explanation is that the hoax and the murder had nothing to do with each other. It's just a damn queer coincidence." Poirot did not agree, I knew, but he merely said noncommittally, "Mais oui, c'est possible." Or, "Look here, how's this? The hoax is innocent enough. Someone gets to hear of it and thinks it will suit their purpose jolly well. That's not a bad idea." He paused and went on. "But personally, I prefer idea number one. What was the link between his lordship and the girl? We'll find out somehow or other." Poirot told him of the letter to America posted by the maid, and Yop agreed that they might possibly be of great assistance. "I'll get on to that at once," he said, making a note of it in his little book. "I'm the more in favor of the lady being the killer, because I can't find anyone else," he said, as he put the book away. "Captain Marsh now, his lordship as now he is, he's got a motive sticking out a yard. Bad record, too. Hard up and none too scrupulous over money. What's more, he had a row with his uncle yesterday morning. He told me that himself, as a matter of fact, which rather takes the taste out of it. Yes, he'd be a likely customer, but he's got an alibi for yesterday evening. He was at the opera with the Dorthmeyers. Rich Jews. Grosvenor Square. I've looked into that, and it's all right. He dined with them. Went to the opera, and they went on to supper at Sobrani's. So that's that." "And the mademoiselle?" "The daughter, you mean?" "She was out of the house, too. Dined with some people called Carthew West. They took her to the opera and saw her home afterwards. 11:45 she got in. That disposes of her. The secretary woman seems all right, very efficient, decent woman. Then there's the butler. I can't say I take to him much. It isn't natural for a man to have good looks like that. There's something fishy about him, and something odd about the way he came to enter Lord Edgware's service. Yes, I'm checking up on him all right. I can't see any motive for murder, though." "No fresh facts have come to light?" "Yes, one or two. It's hard to say whether they mean anything or not. For one thing, Lord Edgware's key is missing." "The key to the front door?" "Yes." "That is interesting, certainly." "As I say, it may mean a good deal, or nothing at all. Depends. What is a bit more significant to my mind is this. Lord Edgware cashed a cheque yesterday. Not a particularly large one. £100, as a matter of fact. He took the money in French notes. That's why he cashed the cheque, because of his journey to Paris today. Well, that money has disappeared." "Who told you of this?" "Miss Carroll. She cashed the cheque and obtained the money. She mentioned it to me, and then I found that it had gone." "Where was it yesterday evening?" "Miss Carroll doesn't know. She gave it to Lord Edgware about 3:30. It was in a bank envelope. He was in the library at the time. He took it and laid it down beside him on a table." "That certainly gives one to think. It is a complication." "Or a simplification. By the way, the wound." "Yes?" "The doctor says it wasn't made by an ordinary penknife. Something of that kind, but a different shaped blade. And it was amazingly sharp." "Not a razor?" No, much smaller." Poirot frowned thoughtfully. "The new Lord Edgware seems to be fond of his joke," remarked Yop. "He seems to think it amusing to be suspected of murder. He made sure we did suspect him of murder, too. Looks a bit queer, that." "It might be merely intelligence." "More likely guilty conscience. His uncle's death came very pat for him. He's moved into the house, by the way." "Where was he living before?" "Martin Street, St. George's Road. Not a very swell neighborhood." "You might make a note of that, Hastings." I did so, though I wondered a little. If Ronald had moved to Regent Gate, his former address was hardly likely to be needed. "I think the Adams girl did it," said Yop, rising. "A fine bit of work on your part, Monsieur Poirot, to tumble to that. But there, of course, you go out to theaters and amuse yourself. Things strike you that don't get the chance of striking me. Pity there's no apparent motive, but a little spade work will soon bring it to light, I expect." "There is one person with a motive to whom you have given no attention," remarked Poirot. "Who's that, sir?" "The gentleman who is reputed to have wanted to marry Lord Edward's wife. I mean the Duke of Merton." "Yes, I suppose there is a motive," Yop laughed. "But a gentleman in his position isn't likely to murder. And anyway, he's over in Paris." "You do not regard him as a serious suspect, then?" "Well, Monsieur Poirot, do you?" And laughing at the absurdity of the idea, Yop left us. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17. The Butler. The following day was one of inactivity for us and activity for Yop. He came round to see us about tea time. He was red and wrathful. "I've made a bloomer." "Impossible, my friend," said Poirot soothingly. "Yes, I have. I've let that—" Here he gave way to profanity. "Of a butler slipped through my fingers." "He has disappeared?" "Yes, hooked it. What makes me kick myself for a double-dyed idiot is that I didn't particularly suspect him." "Calm yourself, but calm yourself, then." "All very well to talk. You wouldn't be calm if you'd been hauled over the coals at headquarters. Oh, he's a slippery customer. It isn't the first time he's given anyone the slip. He's an old hand." Yop wiped his forehead and looked the picture of misery. Poirot made sympathetic noises, somewhat suggestive of a hen laying an egg. With more insight into the English character, I poured out a stiff whiskey and soda and placed it in front of the gloomy inspector. He brightened a little. "Well," he said, "I don't mind if I do." Presently began to talk more cheerfully. "I'm not so sure even now that he's the murderer. Of course, it looks bad, his bolting this way, but there might be other reasons for that. I've begun to get on to him, you know. Seems he's mixed up with a couple of rather disreputable nightclubs. Not the usual thing. Something a great deal more recherche and nasty. In fact, he's a real bad hat. Tout de même, that does not necessarily mean that he is a murderer." "Exactly. He may have been up to some funny business or other, but not necessarily murder. No, I'm more than ever convinced it was the Adams girl. I've got nothing to prove it as yet, though. I've had men going all through her flat today, but we found nothing that's helpful. She was a canny one. Kept no letters except a few business ones about financial contracts. They're all neatly docketed and labeled. Couple of letters from her sister in Washington, quite straight and above board. One or two pieces of good old-fashioned jewelry, nothing new or expensive. She didn't keep a diary. Her passbook and checkbook didn't show anything helpful. Dash it all, the girl doesn't seem to have had any private life at all." "She was of a reserved character," said Poirot thoughtfully. "From our point of view, that is a pity." "I've talked to the woman who did for her. Nothing there. I've been and seen that girl who keeps a hat shop, and who it seems was a friend of hers." "Ah, and what did you think of Miss Driver?" "She was a smart, wide-awake bit of goods. She couldn't help me, though. Not that surprised me. The amount of missing girls I've had to trace, and their family and their friends always say the same things. She was a bright and affectionate disposition, and had no men friends. That's never true. It's unnatural. Girls ought to have men friends. If not, there's something wrong about them. It's the muddle-headed loyalty of friends and relations that makes a detective's life so difficult." He paused for want of breath, and I replenished his glass. "Thank you, Captain Hastings. I don't mind if I do. Well, there you are. You've got to hunt, and hunt about. There's about a dozen young men she went out to supper and danced with, but nothing to show that one of them meant more than any other. There's the present Lord Edgware, there's Mr. Brian Martin, the film star, there's half a dozen others, but nothing special in particular. Your man behind idea is all wrong. I think you'll find that she played a lone hand, Monsieur Poirot. I'm looking now for the connection between her and the murdered man. That must exist. I think I'll have to go over to Paris. There was Paris written in that little gold box, and the late Lord Edgware ran over to Paris several times last autumn. So Miss Carroll tells me, attending sales and buying curios. Yes, I think I must go over to Paris. Inquest tomorrow. It'll be adjourned, of course. After that, I'll take the afternoon boat. You have a furious energy, Yup. It amazes me. Yes, you're getting lazy. You just sit here and think. What you call employing the little gray cells. No good. You've got to go out to things. They won't come to you. The little maidservant opened the door. Mr. Brian Martin, sir. Are you busy, or will you see him? I'm off, Monsieur Poirot. Yop hoisted himself up. All the stars of the theatrical world seem to consult you. Poirot shrugged a modest shoulder, and Yop laughed. You must be a millionaire by now, Monsieur Poirot. What do you do with the money? Save it? Assuredly, I practice the thrift. And talking of the disposal of money, how did Lord Edgware dispose of his? Such property as wasn't entailed he left to his daughter. 500 to Miss Carroll. No other bequests. Very simple will. And it was made when? After his wife left him just over 2 years ago. He expressly excludes her from participation, by the way. A vindictive man, murmured Poirot to himself. With a cheerful so long, Yop departed. Brian Martin entered. He was faultlessly attired and looked extremely handsome, yet I thought that he looked haggard and not too happy. I'm afraid I've been a long time coming, Monsieur Poirot, he said apologetically, and after all I've been guilty of taking up your time for nothing. En vérité? Yes, I've seen the lady in question. I've argued with her, pleaded with her, but all to no purpose. She won't hear of my interesting you in the matter, so I'm afraid we'll have to let the thing drop. I'm very sorry to have bothered you. Du tout, said Poirot genially. I expected this. Eh? The young man seemed taken aback. You expected this? He asked in a puzzled way. Mais oui. When you spoke of consulting your friend, I could have predicted that all would have arrived, as it has done. You have a theory, then? A detective, Monsieur Martin, always has a theory. It is expected of him. I do not call it a theory myself. I say that I have a little idea. That is the first stage. And the second stage? If the little idea turns out to be right, then I know. It is quite simple, you see. I wish you'd tell me what your theory, or your little idea, is. Poirot shook his head gently. That is another rule. The detective never tells. Can't you suggest it even? No. I will only say that I formed my theory as soon as you mentioned the gold tooth. Brian Martin stared at him. I'm absolutely bewildered, he declared. I can't make out what you're driving at. If you'd just give me a hint. Poirot smiled and shook his head. Let us change the subject. Yes, but first, your fee. You must let me. Poirot waved an imperious hand. Pas un sou. I have done nothing to aid you. I took up your time. When a case interests me, I do not touch money. Your case interested me very much. I'm glad, said the actor uneasily. He looked supremely unhappy. Come, said Poirot kindly, let us talk of something else. Wasn't that the Scotland Yard man whom I met on the stairs? Yes, Inspector Yup. The light was so dim I wasn't sure. By the way, he came around and asked me some questions about that poor girl Carlotta Adams. who died of an overdose of veronal. You knew her well, Miss Adams. Not very well. I knew her as a child in America. I came across her here once or twice, but I never saw very much of her. I was very sorry to hear of her death. You liked her? Yes. She was extraordinarily easy to talk to. A personality very sympathetic, yes. I found the same. I suppose they think it might be suicide? I knew nothing that could help the inspector. Carlotta was always very reserved about herself. I do not think it was suicide, said Poirot. Far more likely to be an accident, I agree. There was a pause. Then Poirot said with a smile, The affair of Lord Edgeworth's death becomes intriguing, does it not? Absolutely amazing. Do you know, have they any idea who did it, now that Jane is definitely out of it? Mais oui, they have a very strong suspicion. Brian Martin looked excited. Really? Who? The butler has disappeared. You comprehend, flight is as good as a confession. The butler? Really, you surprise me. A singularly good-looking man. Il vous ressemble un peu. He bowed in a complimentary fashion. Of course. I realize now why the butler's face had struck me as being faintly familiar when I first saw it. You flatter me, said Brian Martin with a laugh. No, no, no. Do not all the young girls, the servant girls, the flappers, the typists, the girls of society, do they not all adore Monsieur Brian Martin? Is there one who can resist you? A lot, I should think, said Martin. He got up abruptly. Well, thank you very much, Monsieur Poirot. Let me apologize again for having troubled you. He shook hands with us both. Suddenly I noticed he looked much older. The haggard look was more apparent. I was devoured with curiosity, and as soon as the door closed behind him, I burst out with what I wanted to know. Poirot, did you really expect him to come back and relinquish all idea of investigating those queer things that happened to him in America? You heard me say so, Hastings. But then, I followed the thing out logically, then you must know who this mysterious girl is that he had to consult. He smiled. I have a little idea, my friend. As I told you, it started from the mention of the gold tooth. And if my little idea is correct, I know who the girl is. I know why she will not let Monsieur Martin consult me. I know the truth of the whole affair. And so could you know it if you would only use the brains the good God has given you? Sometimes I really am tempted to believe that by inadvertence he passed you by. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18. The Other Man. I do not propose to describe either the inquest on Lord Edgware or that on Carlotta Adams. In Carlotta's case, the verdict was death by misadventure. In the case of Lord Edgware, the inquest was adjourned after evidence of identification and the medical evidence had been given. As a result of the analysis of the stomach, the time of death was fixed as having occurred not less than an hour after the completion of dinner, with possible extension to an hour after that. This put it as between 10 and 11 o'clock, with the probability in favor of the earlier time. None of the facts concerning Carlotta's impersonation of Jane Wilkinson were allowed to leak out. A description of the wanted butler was published by the press, and the general impression seemed to be that the butler was the man wanted. His story of Jane Wilkinson's visit was looked upon as an impudent fabrication. Nothing was said of the secretary's corroborating testimony. There were columns concerning the murder in all the papers, but little real information. Meanwhile, Yop was actively at work. I knew. It vexed me a little that Poirot adopted such an inert attitude. The suspicion that approaching old age had something to do with it flashed across me, not for the first time. He made excuses to me which did not ring very convincingly. At my time of life, one saves oneself the trouble, he explained. But Poirot, my dear fellow, you mustn't think of yourself as old, I protested. I felt that he needed bracing, treatment by suggestion, that I know is the modern idea. You are as full of vigor as you ever were, I said earnestly. You're in the prime of life, Poirot. At the height of your powers, you could go out and solve this case magnificently if you only would. Poirot replied that he preferred to solve it sitting at home. But you can't do that, Poirot. Not entirely, it is true. What I mean is, we're doing nothing. Yop is doing everything, which suits me admirably. It doesn't suit me at all. I want you to be doing things. So I am. What are you doing? Waiting? Waiting for what? Porque mon chien déjà me rapporte la guimée, replied Poirot with a twinkle. What do you mean? I mean the good Yop. Why keep a dog and bark yourself? Yop brings us here the result of the physical energy you admire so much. He has various means at his disposal which I have not. He will have news for us very soon, I do not doubt. By dint of persistent inquiry, it was true that Yop was slowly getting together material. He had drawn a blank in Paris, but a couple of days later he came in looking pleased with himself. It's slow work, he said, but we're getting somewhere at last. I congratulate you, my friend. What has happened? I've discovered that a fair-haired lady deposited an attaché case in the cloakroom at Euston at 9 o'clock that night. They've been shown Miss Adams' case and identify it positively. It's of American make, and so just a little different. Ah, Euston. Yes, the nearest of the big stations to Regent Gate. She went there, doubtless, made herself up at the lavatory, and then left the case. When was it taken out again? At 10:30. The clerk says by the same lady. Poirot nodded. And I've come on something else, too. I've reason to believe that Carlotta Adams was in Lyon's Corner House in the Strand at 11 o'clock. Ah, c'est très bien, ça. How did you come across that? Well, really more or less by chance. You see, there's been a mention in the papers of the little gold box with the ruby initials. Some reporter wrote it up. He was doing an article on the prevalence of dope-taking among young actresses. Sunday paper romantic stuff. The fatal little gold box with its deadly contents, pathetic figure of a young girl with all the world before her, and just a wonder expressed as to where she passed her last evening, and how she felt, and so on, and so on. Well, it seems a waitress at the corner house read this, and she remembered that a lady she had served that evening had had such a box in her hand. She remembered the CA on it, and she got excited and began talking to all her friends. Perhaps the paper would give her something. A young newspaper man soon got on to it, and there's going to be a good sob-stuff article in tonight's Evening Shriek. The last hours of the talented actress, waiting for the man who never came, and a good bit about the waitress' sympathetic intuition that something was not well with her sister woman. You know, the kind of bilge, Monsieur Poirot. And how has it come to your ears so quickly? Oh, well, we're on very good terms with the Evening Shriek. It got passed on to me while their particular bright young man tried to get some news out of me about something else, so I rushed along to the corner house straight away. Yes, that was the way things ought to be done. I felt a pang of pity for Poirot. Here was Yop getting all this news at first hand, quite possibly missing valuable details, and here was Poirot placidly content with stale news. I saw the girl, and I don't think there's much doubt about it. She couldn't pick out Carlotta Adams' photograph, but then she said she didn't notice the lady's face particularly. She was young and dark and slim, and very well dressed, the girl said. Had got on one of the new hats. I wish women looked at faces a bit more, and hats a bit less. The face of Miss Adams is not an easy one to observe, said Poirot. It had the mobility, the sensitiveness, the fluid quality. I dare say you're right. I don't go in for analyzing these things. Dressed in black the lady was, so the girl said, and she had an attaché case with her. The girl noticed that particularly, because it struck her as odd that a lady so well dressed should be carrying a case about. She ordered some scrambled eggs and some coffee. but the girl thinks she was putting in time and waiting for someone. It was when the girl came to give her the bill that she noticed the box. The lady took it out of her handbag and had it on the table looking at it. She opened the lid and shut it down again. She was smiling in a pleased, dreamy sort of way. The girl noticed the box particularly because it was such a lovely thing. "I'd like to have a gold box with my initials and rubies on it," she said. Apparently, Miss Adams sat there some time after paying her bill. Then, finally, she looked at her watch once more, seemed to give it up, and went out. Poirot was frowning. "It was a rendezvous," he murmured. "A rendezvous with someone who did not turn up. Did Carlotta Adams meet that person afterwards? Or did she fail to meet him and go home and try to ring him up? I wish I knew. Oh, how I wish I knew." "That's your theory, Monsieur Poirot. Mysterious man in the background. That man in the background's a myth. I don't say she mayn't have been waiting for someone. That's possible. She may have made an appointment to meet someone there after her business with his lordship was settled satisfactorily. Well, we know what happened. She lost her head and stabbed him. But she's not one to lose her head for long. She changes her appearance at the station, gets out her case, goes to the rendezvous, and then what they call the reaction gets her. Horror of what she's done. And when her friend doesn't turn up, that finishes her. He may be someone who knew she was going to Regent Cafe that evening. She feels the game's up, so she takes out her little box of dope, an overdose of that, and it'll be all over. At any rate, she won't be hanged. Why, it's as plain as the nose in her face." Poirot's hand strayed doubtfully to his nose. Then his fingers dropped to his mustaches. He caressed them tenderly with a proud expression. "There was no evidence at all of a mysterious man in the background," said Yupp, pursuing his advantage doggedly. "I haven't got evidence yet of a connection between her and his lordship, but I shall do. It's only a question of time. I must say I'm disappointed about Paris, but 9 months ago is a long time. I've still got someone making inquiries over there. Something may come to light yet. I know you don't think so. You're a pig-headed old boy, you know." "You insult first my nose and then my head." "Figure of speech, that's all," said Yop soothingly. "No offense meant." "The answer to that," I said, "is nor taken." Poirot looked from one to the other of us, completely puzzled. "Any orders?" inquired Yop facetiously from the door. Poirot smiled forgivingly at him. "An order? No. A suggestion, yes." "Well, what is it? Out with it." "A suggestion that you circularize the taxicabs. Find one that took a fare, or more probably 2 fares. Yes, 2 fares, from the neighborhood of Covent Garden to Regent Gate on the night of the murder. As to time, it would probably be about 20 minutes to 11. Yop cocked an eye alertly. He had the look of a smart terrier dog. "So that's the idea, is it? I'll do it. Can't do any harm, and you sometimes know what you're talking about." No sooner had he left than Poirot arose and with great energy began to brush his hat. "Ask me no questions, my friend. Instead, bring me the benzine. A morsel of omelette this morning descended on my waistcoat." I brought it to him. "For once," I said, "I do not think I need to ask questions. It seems fairly obvious. But do you think it really is so?" "Mon ami, at the moment I concern myself solely with the toilet. If you will pardon me saying so, your tie does not please me." "It's a jolly good tie," I said. "Possibly once. It feels the old age, as you have been kind enough to say I do. Change it, I beseech you, and also brush the right sleeve." "Are we proposing to call on King George?" I inquired sarcastically. "No, but I saw in the newspaper this morning that the Duke of Merton had returned to Merton House. I understand he is a premier member of the English aristocracy. I wish to do him all honor." There is nothing of the socialist about Poirot. "Why are we going to call on the Duke of Merton?" "I wish to see him." That was all I could get out of him. When my attire was at last handsome enough to please Poirot's critical eye, we started out. At Burton House, Poirot was asked by a footman if he had an appointment. Poirot replied in the negative. The footman bore away the card and returned shortly to say that his Grace was very sorry, but he was extremely busy this morning. Poirot immediately sat down in a chair. "Très bien," he said. "I wait. I will wait several hours if need be." This, however, was not necessary. Probably as the shortest way of getting rid of the importunate caller, Poirot was bidden to the presence of the gentleman he desired to see. The Duke was about 27 years of age. He was hardly prepossessing in appearance, being thin and weakly. He had nondescript thin hair going bald at the temples, a small bitter mouth, and vague dreamy eyes. There were several crucifixes in the room, and various religious works of art. A wide shelf of books seemed to contain nothing but theological works. He looked far more like a weedy young haberdasher than like a duke. He had, I knew, been educated at home, having been a terribly delicate child. This was the man who had fallen an immediate prey to Jane Wilkinson. It was really ludicrous in the extreme. His manner was priggish, and his reception of us just short of courteous. "You may perhaps know my name?" began Poirot. "I have no acquaintance with it." "I study the psychology of crime." The Duke was silent. He was sitting at a writing table, an unfinished letter before him. He tapped impatiently on the desk with his pen. "For what reason did you wish to see me?" he inquired coldly. Poirot was sitting opposite him. His back was to the window. The Duke was facing it. "I am at present engaged on investigating the circumstances connected with Lord Edgware's death." Not a muscle of the weak yet obstinate face moved. "Indeed, I was not acquainted with him." "But you are, I think, acquainted with his wife, with Miss Jane Wilkinson." "That is so." "You are aware that she is supposed to have had a strong motive for desiring the death of her husband." "I am really not aware of anything of the kind." "I should like to ask you outright, Your Grace, are you shortly going to marry Miss Jane Wilkinson?" "When I am engaged to marry anyone, the fact will be announced in the newspapers. I consider your question an impertinence." He stood up. "Good morning." Poirot stood up also. He looked awkward. He hung his head. He stammered. "I did not mean. Je vous demande pardon." "Good morning," repeated the Duke, a little louder. This time Poirot gave it up. He made a characteristic gesture of hopelessness, and we left. It was an ignominious dismissal. I felt rather sorry for Poirot. His usual bombast had not gone well. To the Duke of Merton, a great detective was evidently lower than a black beetle. "That didn't go too well," I said sympathetically. "What a stiff-necked tartar the man is. What did you really want to see him for?" "I wanted to know whether he and Jane Wilkinson are really going to marry." "She said so." "Ah, she said so. But you realize she is of those who say anything that suits their purpose. She might have decided to marry him, and he, poor man, might not yet be aware of the fact." "Well, he certainly sent you away with a flea in the ear." "He gave me the reply he would give to a reporter, yes." Poirot chuckled. "But I know. I know exactly how the case stands." "How do you know? By his manner?" "Not at all. You see, he was writing a letter." "Yes." "Eh bien, in my early days in the police force in Belgium, I learned that it was very useful to read handwriting upside down. Shall I tell you what he was saying in that letter?" "My dearest, I can hardly bear to wait through the long months. Jane, my adored, my beautiful angel, how can I tell you what you are to me? You who have suffered so much, your beautiful nature." "Poirot," I cried, scandalized, stopping him. This was as far as he had got. "Your beautiful nature. Only I know it." I felt very upset. He was so naively pleased with his performance. "Poirot," I cried, "you can't do a thing like that. Overlook a private letter." "You say the imbecilities, Hastings. Absurd to say I cannot do a thing which I have just done. It's not playing the game. I do not play games. You know that. Murder is not a game. It is serious. And anyway, Hastings, you should not use that phrase, playing the game. It is not said anymore. I have discovered that it is dead. Young people laugh when they hear it. Maybe young beautiful girls will laugh at you if you say playing the game and not cricket." I was silent. I could not bear this thing that Poirot had done so light-heartedly. "It was so unnecessary," I said. "If you had only told him that you had gone to Lord Edgware at Jane Wilkinson's request, then he would have treated you very differently." "Ah, but I could not do that. Jane Wilkinson was my client. I cannot speak of my client's affairs to another. I undertake a mission in confidence. To speak of it would not be honorable." "Honorable?" "Precisely." "But she is going to marry him. That does not mean that she has no secrets from him. Your ideas about marriage are very old-fashioned. No, what you suggest I cannot possibly have done. I have my honor as a detective to think of. The honor, it is a very serious thing." "Well, I suppose it takes all kind of honor to make the world." End of chapter 18.